Thank you all for being here. We are also inspired here today by the presence of Chan Rogers. Chan was a member of a group of Army soldiers who liberated the infamous Dachau concentration camp. He was an Army platoon sergeant in the 157th Infantry. I'd like to give a round of applause to Chan. We are also inspired today by the presence of young people, including our Holocaust essay contest winners, who have committed to be upstanders in the presence of bullying and intolerance. As we listen to the words expressed here today, I ask that we all commit ourselves to confronting the disturbing trends in our world. May we draw from the courage of those in the Warsaw Ghetto to stand united, raising our voices collectively against those who would lead us down a road paved with hatred. And may we do this as part of our sacred obligation to the 6 million and the survivors who we honor today. I'd ask that you all who are able, kindly rise for the American and Israeli national anthems.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so bright
May 5th, 1945, the 11th Armored Division liberated the concentration camp that my father was in. He had no place to go, and he had nobody. The International Red Cross tried to reunite and relocate the survivors. They confirmed what my father already feared. One by one, they came back and told him that his mother had been killed. His father had been killed. His brother had been killed. His sister had been killed. His 90-year-old grandmother had been killed. Every member of his family was gone. Every person in his community, every kid he went to school with, they were all gone. Of those who survived the Holocaust, most lost someone, some lost many, and others, like my father, lost everyone. Of those who perished, none were given a funeral or laid to rest in a proper cemetery, marked with a gravestone that relatives could visit. Few survivors know the dates that their relatives were killed. We will never know how many of those who perished left no one to remember them, no one to say Kaddish for them, no one to light a Yortzeit candle in memory of them. Yom HaShoah represents all those unknown dates for all the millions that were killed in many different locations on many different dates. Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, a candle of the Lord, is the human soul. From these words in the book of Proverbs, we take the custom of lighting a candle, a memorial candle, a Yortzeit candle, on the anniversary of deaths of loved ones. We mourn for those taken from the world during the Holocaust, those that survivors knew and those that we never knew, but who are part of us and deserve to be remembered. We asked Jody Kipnis and Todd Rutterman to light the first candle in memory of the 6 million. Together, they have formed the Holocaust Legacy Foundation. Survivors in this community have hoped for decades that a Holocaust Memorial Museum would be built in Boston. Now, as a result of their commitment, there will be one right here on the Freedom Trail, where visitors will learn about the 6 million who perished and about the history of the survivors of this city. We thank you both for your dedication on developing this museum in Boston, and your efforts are truly appreciated by the survivors, children of survivors, and today we even have grandchildren and great-grandchildren of survivors. This city will have a place not too far from the New England Holocaust Memorial Site where people can learn about the horrific period in history. We will never know what was lost from the world, but we do know that the 6 million people cannot be forgotten or their history altered to suit the needs of others. We thank you both.
Hari
Leaders of faith in our community are invited to continue lighting candles in memory of the 6 million Jews, including 1.5 million children.
בביאת המשיח אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין, באמונה של אמו, בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין, אני מאמין. אני מאמין, אני מאמין, באמונה שלמה, בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין, שאף על פי שיתממע, אחכה לו אני מאמין. אני מאמין, באמונה שלמה, בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין.
Yom HaShoah is also a time that we remember those we have lost recently. As I look out into this great hall, I miss seeing the faces of those who used to gather here with us and are no longer here. This year, we remember Lester Isbecki, survivor, and his wife, Rachel Isbecki. And the honor of lighting this candle is given to members of their family. Howard Isbecki, a second-generation survivor, his sister, Helen Isbecki Abrams, a second-generation survivor, and their granddaughter, Allison Abrams DeVito, third-generation survivor. With the passing of survivors, we continue to lose the eyewitnesses to history. An entire community vanishes again when a survivor passes away. We lose the sound to English spoken with a European Yiddish accent. We lose hearing Yiddish spoken. We lose a connection to a way of life destroyed by World War II. European Jewish foods and customs no longer exist the way they did before the war. The Isbeckis were able to build a new life with children and grandchildren and now a great-grandchild, to carry on their legacy, ensuring that their family history is not lost. Lester reached 100 years old this year and lived to see 3 generations born in freedom. That's not Miles, but wherever you are, Miles, we say thank you. Thank you for being here. We remember Michael Gruenbaum, survivor. The honor of lighting a candle is given to Debbie Colton from the Lapin Foundation, who worked very closely with Michael, arranging opportunities for him to speak. Like many survivors, Michael chose not to speak about his experience. Survivors that did not speak perhaps feared scaring their own children, or perhaps it was their way of coping with life after the war. There is no mechanism to measure the pain that each survivor feels, and no medicine strong enough to erase the horrific memories. But fortunately, when Michael was in his 80s, he decided it was time to talk and tell his history. Through his writings and his talks to groups and his help from Debbie, he presented his story hundreds of times over, wrote several books, and now we're fortunate enough that we have recordings Michael made for us. So Debbie, we ask you to light a candle in honor of your dear friend. We remember Allison Paddock Shoemaker, second-generation survivor. The honor of lighting this candle is given to her mother, Eva Paddock, survivor, and Paul Shoemaker, her husband, who join us virtually. Allison was a graphics designer who volunteered her services for the Survivors Association for years. Every piece of collateral material that we produced was courtesy of Allison. She was also an instrumental part of a group of 50 survivors, second generation, and a few third generation people that we brought from Boston to Washington, D.C. to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. We were the only city who had a group that went together. My father used to say that any time he met a survivor, he instantly felt like he knew that person. This is true for those of us who are 2Gs and 3Gs. From the moment I met Allison many years ago, we formed a bond. She referred to me as her sister from another mother. When I got married, it was Allison who helped prepare programs, menu cards, gift tags, anything that I need printed. And on the day of our wedding, she was the person I trusted the most to help me get into that gown with all the buttons. Eva and Paul, my heart is broken with you. May you find comfort in knowing how much she was loved by others and how much she will be missed. We remember Fred Manass, survivor. The honor of lighting this candle is given to his wife, Annette, their daughter, Lauren Manass Latham, second-generation survivor, her husband, Patrick, and their son, Finn, third-generation survivor. Fred was an active member of our association. He was a board member, and he sat on the JCRC Advisory Council, and he hosted child survivor meetings, and he spoke at schools and associations, and was a longtime member of the planning committee that puts together this observance each year. In later years, he became an artist who specialized in making Holocaust-related bronze sculptures. Fred and his brother were on the Kinder Transport. They were the last two children squeezed onto an already full train. That day, Fred learned two very important lessons. He learned that his older 6-year-old brother, standing there holding his hand, had just become his only parent. He also learned that their sister, who was not on the train with them, would be lost to them forever, and Fred would spend the rest of his life trying to find out what happened to her. Fred had a fierce determination to succeed, and he did so brilliantly in his education, in his profession, and in what was important to him. When Fred Kamm and I were planning our wedding, Fred Manass lovingly offered to walk me down the aisle. Instead, we decided that Fred and Annette should walk Fred Kamm down the aisle, since both of Fred's parents were survivors from Germany, where Fred Manass was originally from. There is a wonderful picture of these two tall, strong men walking down the aisle of the synagogue holding hands. A tremendous loss to our community, and especially to his dear family. We ask you to light a candle in honor of your husband, your father, and your grandfather. We remember Aaron Greenfield, born Aaron Grunfeld, survivor. The honor of this candle is given to his wife, Martha, their daughter, Nadine Greenfield Binstock, second-generation survivor, and to Aaron's nephew, Joe Greenspan, second-generation survivor. Aaron was one of 9 children. Aaron and one brother were the only members of their family who survived. Survivors were robbed of their families, their homes, their possessions, their communities, their schools, and what should have been their futures. Aaron was blessed to survive and come to this country. But even here, The two brothers again were robbed out of what was their family name. One became a Greenfield, the other a Greenspan. For more than 75 years, Aaron carried images and memories of 7 siblings and his parents who were killed. None of us can ever grasp the enormous weight it must have been for Aaron to shoulder this load. Here, Aaron was also known by other names. Some people called him Mr. Brenner. Along with Martha, they owned a children's clothing store. But most important to Aaron were the names his family gave him: Dad and Zadie. With Aaron's passing, we lose a dear member of our community. And we have another hole in the piece of our history, a missing link to a world destroyed. Aaron graciously gave of his time speaking to thousands of students at hundreds of schools, quite often driven there by Martha. They were a team, and together, Martha helped him make life anew here. We remember Esther Kempler, survivor, her family joining us virtually. Esther so appreciated anything that anyone did for her. The Survivors Association started distributing food around holidays. In recent years, as a result of COVID, volunteers loaded boxes and made deliveries. Each time Esther received a package, she was grateful for being remembered. Survivors fear that what happened during the Holocaust will be forgotten. The museum in Boston is a blessing and a reassurance to survivors. Esther was grateful that someone took the time to think of her, and as a community, we are grateful that all of our survivors will be remembered. We remember Harvey Lewin, survivor. The honor of lighting a candle is given to members of his family. Sally Cohen, second-generation survivor. Her son, Harvey's great-nephew, but really a grandson to him and a devoted companion, Nate Cohen, third-generation survivor. Sally grew up with 2 sets of parents, all survivors, including her uncle. After the war, Harvey, like Michael Gruenbaum, never talked about what happened. When he first came to this country, he wanted to talk about it. But a cousin of his said to him, "We had it tough here too, we couldn't get meat." And Harvey said to himself that if they compare not getting meat to what he had gone through in the Holocaust, he would never speak about it again. Well, fortunately, decades later, Harvey came to me after hearing me speak and said to me, "How did you know what was in my head?" And a result of that, he decided to tell me his family history. I have retold Harvey's story hundreds of times. It is my responsibility. It's the responsibility of his family, and hopefully it'll be the responsibility of museum for others to hear Harvey's story. He was a member of the New Americans, the Survivors Association, for all the years that he was in this country, which was pretty much the majority of his 103 years. I feel fortunate to have wonderful, fond memories of a very dear person who in many ways, I think his family would agree, was bigger than life and missed very dearly. We remember Alan Cronenberg, second-generation survivor. A candle is lit by his mother, Mary Ann Cronenberg, survivor, his brother Jerry, second-generation survivor, his sister-in-law Karen, and his caregiver Princesses, who are attending virtually. Our heart breaks for each loss in our community. But for a survivor to lose a child is even more difficult. 2 Gs have many things in common. Most of all, we feel a need to protect our survivor parents, to shelter them from pain, and to comfort them. Losing a child in many ways is too reminiscent of losses during the war. Mary Ann, our heart and our hugs go out to you and your family. Our community has suffered many losses this year, but it is with overwhelming sadness and incredible appreciation that we remember Margot Stern Strom, founder of Facing History and ourselves. The honor of lighting this candle is given to Judy Bond, who worked with Margot for many years at Facing History and was also a member of the Yom HaShoah Planning Committee for a very long time. As a public school 8th grade teacher, Margot Stern-Strom was tasked with learning about the Holocaust so that she could teach other teachers so they could teach their students. Prior to this, in this community, when students learned about World War II, they were not taught anything about the Holocaust. Facing History, led by Margot Stern-Strom, provided schools with learning materials and worked with many of the survivors in our community, bringing them to speak to the students directly, quite often driven there by Judy. Without Margot Stern-Strom's efforts, most people would have little or no knowledge about the Holocaust. Each of the losses remembered here today are difficult for me. Most of us can count on one hand those that have made a difference in our lives, someone that they have known for over 50 years, aside from the members of their own family. Margot Stern-Strom is one of those people to me, for she was my 8th grade teacher, and I was in the first class when she moved to Boston. The lessons she taught and the impact she had on me are still something that I remember all these many years later. On behalf of the survivors, Judy, your loss is our loss. But we cannot offer condolences, only appreciation that there was a Margot Stern-Strom in our lifetime who left her mark on our history. For this, I would give this teacher an A+ grade. Jack Trumpeter will present his testimony here today. The honor of lighting this next candle is in memory of his many family members who perished, the Trumpeters, the Zomer Blanks, the Isermans. Jack, we are truly honored to hear from you today. May we continue to gather as a community to mourn for those taken from the world by hatred. May this new museum ensure that those who were killed are not forgotten. May we always be grateful that there were survivors. May we be thankful to those who liberated them, to those who teach about the Holocaust. And to those of you who are here today, Each person that perished meant the world to someone. May the 6 million rest in peace, knowing that there were survivors and generations born after the war, and that we remember them. Thank you.
We will be singing La Yehudim by Noam Katz, which is the second musical interlude in your program.
As an addendum to the prior list of attending religious and civic leaders, we also want to welcome Boston City Councilor Kenzie Bach and Reverend Nancy Taylor. It is now my honor to introduce the Consuls General from Israel and Germany. Ambassador Meron Rubin has served as the Consul General of Israel to the New England states since November 2020. He has a diplomatic career spanning 3.5 decades, during which he has served in various positions, including roles at the Israeli embassies in Chile and Mexico, and as ambassador to Paraguay, Bolivia, and Colombia, and as the permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations. Dr. Sonia Kreibich has served as the Consul General of Germany to the New England states since July 2022. Before arriving in Boston, she served at the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Berlin as the head of Division for Pan-African Issues, Southern Africa and the Great Lakes. Prior to this, she served as the head of Unit for European Migration Policy. We welcome both of you and thank you for joining us. First, we will hear from Ambassador Rubin, followed by Dr. Kreibich.
Good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, I would like to say what an honor it is to be here in front of the survivors who, over the last 2 years, I have learnt to get to know, and especially those who liberated the survivors and allowed them to be here with us. I would say that we were a lucky family. On my father's side, my great-grandparents left the Caucasus and Ukraine and emigrated to the United Kingdom. On my mother's side, my great-grandparents left Tsarist Russia, which today is Lithuania, and moved to South Africa. And they really were the lucky ones. For some unknown reason, they had the foresight to leave the area a long time before the disasters of the Second World War. But not all the branches of the family left, and lots of them were cut off totally. The branches of the family that were cut off, though, did leave 2 little girls who managed to get through the Holocaust and live their lives in the end not far from Boston, where they passed away in Far Rockaway in Long Island, New York. But they only managed to survive the Holocaust because they were twins. And unfortunately, they were experimented on by Joseph Mengele in the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. So unfortunately, they too did not leave any family. The Holocaust seems to touch everybody, even if one's immediate family was not cut off by what happened during the Second World War. But one of the things that we remember today, especially this year, is the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which was the longest and I would say the most symbolic and important Jewish uprising against the Nazis and the first urban uprising in German-occupied Europe. There is a lovely story that goes with this. That is the fact that the last commander, Mark Edelman, who led the uprising and survived, used to receive every year a bouquet of yellow daffodils. For all the Bostonians here who walk the gardens of Boston in spring, yellow daffodils are a sign that spring is here and change is in the air. And Edelman received this bouquet of daffodils from an anonymous person, and every year he took them to the hero of ghetto uprising in Warsaw Memorial. Today, in the age of modern technology, the idea is to take a photo of yourselves with a beautiful yellow flower, the daffodil, in memory of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. In the Waterghetto uprising, some 13,000 Jews perished, but they were few among the millions who died. 1/3 of the Jewish race was murdered, equal practically to the entire population of Massachusetts today, or if we are going to compare, to 9 cities the size of Boston. What lesson would I like you to take home today for the children and the future of the 21st century? I think here, to use in Boston, is the fact that of our 6 million of our brethren that were slaughtered during the Second World War, they are the memory that needs to be remembered. And I would like to say that they were killed because of whom they were and because of the race that they belonged to, the Jewish race. And I think that this is something that we are forgetting in today's history lessons, that racism is not only against people of color, it can also be against people of religions and who are not of color. And I think that that is the main lesson that I'd like you to take for today, for the children and for the future of everybody, so that we can be able to fight the anti-Semitism that has reared its ugly head here in the United States and all over the world. I once again wish to thank you for the honor of being here and being able to speak to you this afternoon for the first time in person. Thank you.
Honored members of the Jewish community of Greater Boston, as a German and as Germany's Consul General to New England, it's a hard path that brings me here today. But at the same time, I'm deeply grateful to be here. Thank you to the Jewish Community Relations Council for inviting me on this very important day. I am honored and moved to be standing here in solidarity with all of you and among the brave Holocaust survivors and their families. Yom HaShoah serves as the day for the world to unite in remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust, to honor the survivors and their families, and to reinforce our commitment to ensuring that the horrors of the past are never forgotten and never repeated. This is a very painful but important day for Germans. It forces us to confront the darkest chapter of German history. Understanding and being honest about our history is the only way we can hope to transform it into an opportunity, to learn from and hand down the lessons we have learned. This is the only way that we can make sure that the betrayal of all civilized values that was the Shoah will never happen again. I am here to remember. Because we must remember in order to recognize where hatred and nationalism, anti-Semitism and racist doctrines can lead. We must not tolerate this, and we must and will take a resolute stand against it. It pains and angers me that anti-Semitism is gaining strength once again. In speeches, on the streets, in schools, and particularly on the internet. Even in the throes of a pandemic, old hatred has been reworked into new conspiracy theories, whipping up enmity, threats, and violence. German authorities reported over 3,000 anti-Semitic crimes in 2021, the highest figure since police began to track reported incidents in 2001. In an AJC poll from last year, 60% of the general German population considers anti-Semitism a widespread phenomenon in Germany, and 64% say the problem has increased over the past 10 years. It worries us also that anti-Semitic incidents in New England have risen to historically high levels and ranged from physical assault to classroom occurrences. German Federal President Frank-Walter Steinmeier has described anti-Semitism as a seismograph for the state of our democracy. The more openly, the more aggressively it is expressed, the greater the risk to our values. This is the lesson we have learned from our past, and it is a warning and a mandate for both the present and the future. Germany does not forget where anti-Semitism can lead to. It knows how closely anti-Semitism is linked with how the Holocaust is remembered. Germany is therefore steadfast in its commitment to Holocaust education and remembrance. In Germany, Holocaust education is mandatory in secondary school education, and it has been an essential component in our commitment to look honestly and critically at the darkest chapter of our history. The reckoning with the crimes committed during the Holocaust thus continues today. We are responsible for educating about the causes, consequences, and dynamics of hate crimes to strengthen young people's resilience against ideologies of hatred. On a local level, the German consulate in Boston is fully committed to continuing the work of educating the next generation and ensuring that the memory of those who died are not forgotten. We are a proud sponsor of programs like the Israel Arbeiter Holocaust Essay Contest, of which we will learn a bit later today. I feel very fortunate that the Jewish community and Holocaust survivors in the Boston area have been so open to get to know me as the new German Consul General when I arrived last summer and to work together with us on our shared goals. Local Holocaust survivors whom I have had the privilege to meet have told me that they are hopeful about the future when they see how a country like Germany has developed. Modern Germany is a nation that is committed to international law, to human dignity, and to peace. We stand on this foundation and we must protect it. That is part of the responsibility imposed on us by our history. We cannot change the past, but we can take its lesson to ensure a better future. With that, let us dedicate ourselves today to cultivating a world in which we always choose tolerance and compassion over discrimination and violence. Thank you.
Remembrance of the Holocaust teaches us that even the most unimaginable horrors cannot break the human spirit. And our speaker today, Jack Trumpeter, is a testament to that. He shares his story so that no one will ever forget the evils of the Nazis. I first met Jack when I joined Schechter Holocaust Services at Jewish Family and Children's Services. Jack has served on our advisory committee for many years and brings so much to each meeting. Jack has been a mentor, a friend, and a man who has a joke to share whenever needed. Today, he will share his pain from his childhood, but also tell us how, despite these horrific beginnings, he remains such an optimist, warm, humble, kind, and strong. This year, the theme of the program is Remember Our Past, Meeting the Moments, and Ensuring Our Future. Holocaust survivors may be dwindling, but the message of survival, loss, and resilience and hope will forever remain. I think you will all agree with me, Jack is the perfect choice as our speaker today. And I am truly honored to introduce him and have him join me at the podium.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Wow, what a thing to follow. Thank you all for being here. My name is Isaac Jack Trumpeter. I'm a youthful Holocaust survivor. Since August, I'm 80, first time. I was born in Amsterdam, Holland. When I was born, Holland had already been occupied for a little over 2 years by the Germans, the Nazis, the crazies. One of the first things they did when they entered Holland, they began the process of separating out the Jewish community from the rest of Holland. That meant, for example, if your parents were doctors, nurses, firemen, policemen, teachers, jurists, you're out of a job because you could have nothing to do with infecting the Gentile community. As I tell you all of this, I ask you to think of my story as your story. My father had the misfortune of being out on the street when there was a raid. It's called a razzia. I don't know the origin of that word. Amsterdam is a city of something like 600 islands surrounded by bridges, and some bridges would go up and come down. The Germans would enter the Jewish neighborhood, bring the bridges up, no one could flee. And my father and a few hundred other Jewish men were arrested. They were taken to a local high school gymnasium. They were told to lay on their bellies and periodically beaten on their backs and the back of their legs. And this is something that has affected my father throughout his whole life, even after the war. He was there for a week. Comes the day for me to be born. There's a curfew. There are two curfews. There are curfews for the Gentile community. There's a curfew for the Jewish community. This, of course, was problematic because when it was safe and time for the Jewish community to go out and do their marketing, there was almost nothing left. As well, you didn't get your food with money. You had to have coupons. And you were allowed so much per week, and there was never enough food as it was, because the Germans would loot everything and send it back to Germany, so the German people would not feel they were paying a price for having a war, for invading other countries. It's time for me to come into the world. There's a curfew. My mother's father, Gerrit Zomerplach of blessed memory, decides, hell with the curfew, I'm going with my daughter to help her. They go to the local hospital. As they go in the hospital, they observe that German troops are going throughout the wards, dragging people out. They had not hit the maternity ward yet. I am born between 2 and 4 in the morning. My grandfather and my mother wait till the curfew is over. They come home, and imagine, there's my mother, a 31-year-old woman with her first child. You know the magic, the power, the mystery, and the fear of being that 24-hour parent. And with all of that, there is being a Jewish woman not knowing what's going to happen tonight, tomorrow morning, next day. You could not plan anything. The world had turned upside down. Cause and effect no longer meant anything. If you can all imagine, the worst people you've had the misfortune of meeting in your life, they became the power on top. If you were a Jewish person walking in the street with your coat and your Jewish star, and somebody wanted to come up and hit you upside the head and do whatever, you could do nothing. You had no law to refer to. There was no one to protect you at all. So there's my mother with her new princeling, wonderful, wonderful, terrified. And where is the old man? Where's my father? He's under arrest. My mother doesn't know this has happened. After a week, my father and all these other Jewish men in the high school gymnasium are told to stand up in rows. They had a German doctor and a Dutch doctor walk in front of every man, asking them, Haben Sie eine Krankheit? Do you have an illness? The Germans were deathly afraid of contagious disease. And this is the scientific way in which they dealt with it. They also were smart enough to know that if they yelled when they spoke to you, if they had imminent violence in their manner and their voice, you would be terrified, you would be off your game, you would not know what to do. There's a Dutch doctor, a German doctor in front of my father. The question is, do you have an illness? And someone is yelling, mach schnell, hurry up, hurry up. Someone says, jawohl, yes. It is misunderstood that indeed this man, my father, has a contagious disease. He's taken by the scruff of his collar, unlucky guy, he's thrown out into the street. Science. He gets to a telephone, calls up his place of business, the restaurant. They come with a bicycle with a big delivery box. They plop him in the box. They take him to the restaurant. He later that day comes home and sees me for the first time. And my mother sees him after a week. And he, like my mother, is thrilled and delighted. The princeling has arrived. But he also knows he was so abused and treated so badly only because he was a Jewish man. He didn't commit a crime. He didn't do anything. The Jewish people in Holland were relatively well assimilated, and like other people believe, you work hard, you obey the law, you don't cross against the light, you pay your taxes, everything will be okay. None of that made a difference anymore. My father understood that because how he was treated in the high school gymnasium. He gets it into his head, what am I going to do? He thinks he's going to go into hiding. In Holland, the Dutch word for people who go into hiding was submarine, onderduiken. Now imagine today, for example, if all of a sudden in this country we had, for example, an orange-haired demon become president, and all of you are in the wrong cradle, what do? You might think, oh, I'll go into hiding. I'll go Mexico, Canada, Brooklyn, the Caribbean. Where do you go? How do you do it? My people were ordinary working class people. They didn't have 70 years of watching television, detective stories, figuring this stuff out. They had to, like a lot of Jewish people, all the Jewish people had to dance as fast as they could, if you know what I mean. So they decided, we're going to go into hiding. My parents were active in the social democratic labor movement. They knew people who knew people who knew people who knew people who were involved in the resistance. There were many forms of resistance in Holland. One of them was high school students and college students providing hiding places for Jewish families, and particularly for Jewish children. They had a caveat, though, that said whole families could not go into hiding, because if you were busted, everyone would perish. If the family was separated, at least there's a chance somebody might survive. There you are, my mother and father, with your baby. And now it's about I'm 3.5 months old, and the decision to organize and do the hiding is going to start to happen. And there you are with your new baby, and you're my mother, and you're being told, yeah, give up the kid. There might be a chance he'll survive. Imagine being that mother. There's no good decision. Lucky for me, lucky for her older brother, Maurits, of blessed memory, and my father, Gerrit, of blessed memory, were able to convince my mother, listen, take the chance, maybe the kid will survive. Those are the kind of odds, and those are the kind of conversations that move people to act. I'm sent to my aunt Alida, Tante Ali. She is Gentile. I stay with her. My parents begin the process of going into hiding. Late at night, they take the Star of David off their coats. My mother was a seamstress, so she knew enough to know you got to take the stitching out as well, so it doesn't look like I'd been a Jewish star there. Late at night, they go to the central station in Amsterdam, and my mother talked about she was so angry because she was made to feel like a criminal skulking late at night to the train station. They get on the train, they see Dutch people having a smoke, drinking coffee, German soldiers, same thing, yakking, ordinary people. For the Gentile community in Holland, many of the people were bystanders during the war. Only a few were upstanders, and then there was the rest of us and other resistors. Their first night is spent in Rotterdam, and then they're told, go south to Tilburg, and there look for a tall man with a bicycle with a flat tire. The reason for that is they had to follow him and not look like they were following him. And if he's biking, doesn't look good. They follow him. His name is Jan van Dumburg of blessed memory. He's all of 25 years old. He was a baker's assistant, a very conservative, upstanding Catholic man who was very angry that Germany had invaded his country and his queen had to leave and go to England. And he wanted to do something, but he didn't know what. He eventually gets involved in this. The moment comes, my parents follow him to his house. The door opens. There is Corrie van Dumburg of blessed memory. She is all of 22 years old. And my mother told me many years later, what she felt was, oh, you poor young people, what have you taken upon yourself? Now, these were young people who understood that hiding Jews place themselves in the same dangerous position as Jews. If they were busted and caught, they would end up in a concentration camp and probably be killed because they were considered enemies of the Reich, traitors to the Reich. So there my parents and Cornian getting to understand each other, getting to know each other. None of them, no one having any idea of how long people will be in hiding. Maybe a few weeks, outside a month or two. No one thought about a few years. My parents were in hiding for 2.5 years. I was in hiding for almost 3 years. So there my parents. Now it's time for me to begin my journey. I end up in a Quaker orphanage. I'm there for a short time, And what do I know? I'm between 3.5 and 4 months old. All the information from the world that comes into me is absorbed by my body, my little mushy baby brain. What do I know? I can poop and I can eat and I can sleep. Life is good. Cora and Jan and my parents are getting to know each other. And of course, my mother is continually fretting, Jackie, where is he? How is he? Where is he? Is he alive? And she's driving everyone nuts. Cora takes it upon herself to go find where I am. She's given some information that she can go to my Aunt Ali in Amsterdam, so she's credible. She goes to where I am. She observes that the orphanage is right across the street from German barracks. The British had already started bombing the countryside. This is 42. And Cora, I don't know how she manages to do it. She takes me out of the orphanage. She spends the night in the woods with me. There's no traffic and there are curfews. The next morning, she gets on a train and she's 22 years old and she too is trying to act as if she's someone else. She's the mother of this hairy little thing, this baby. And she sits with me in the train, and at some point, a Dutch woman leans over and goes, "Oh, what a cute little baby. Is that a Jewish baby?" And Cora goes, "How dare you?" Woman shuts up. Cora and I travel to Amsterdam. Cora's smart. She manages to take a photo of me. She brings me back to my Tante Ali. Cora goes back to Tilburg, where my mother is. Here's the princeling. He's alive. He's okay. Hooray, hooray. My mother carries his photograph with me throughout the war, prays to it every day throughout the war. And she has a lock of my hair as well. And many years later, in the 1960s, when I was a young man, and it was the law that you had to have long hair, you had to have a hoop earring, you had to have bell-bottom pants, and you had to say things like farm out, stuff like that. And of course, I'm a conformist. I did all of that. And parents had the responsibility of saying, "Oh, you look like a bum. No one will love you. You'll never get a job." So after a while, I cut my hair, I put it in a brown paper bag, and I mailed it to my mother, not knowing the hair story. She gets the bag, she opens it up, and all of it washes all over her again. And she calls me and gives me a piece of her mind. And that's one of the ways I, as a child survivor, learned some of the details of what happened with me, what happened with my parents. I am eventually sent to a town called Heino, H-E-I-N-O, which is about 15 kilometers from the German border in the center of Holland. The groups that provided hiding places understood that the south of Holland was mostly Catholic. The north of Holland was mostly Protestant. This was important because since Spain occupied southern Holland, the people there were a little bit darker. You know, they had a good time. And the people in the north, which were not occupied by Spain, still maintained their very flaxen-haired, fair-haired appearance. So Jewish children who were lighter were sent into hiding in the north. Jewish children like myself who were darker went to the south. I ended up in the middle, however. And I end up with the De Groot family of blessed memory. These were very religious Catholic people. They were farmers. They were very poor. And out of their religious belief took me in because I was a member of the people of the book. So they took the same risk as Cora and Jan took, and they hid me and became my parents for this period from 4 months to almost 3 years. It was a farm. There were the sights, the sounds, the smells. It was comfortable for me. They touched me sweetly. They fed me, even though food was always a problem. And I grew up thinking these were my parents, not yet having a conscious understanding of the contradictions and the context. And I live with them, and my parents and Cora and Jan are together in hiding. And at some point, there's no more contact. My parents have no idea where I am, whether I'm alive, and I don't know that my parents are other people. Cora and Jan had a radio, which was illegal to have. They would listen to the British Broadcasting Corporation, and in January 1943, they heard the German announcement of the strategic retreat from Stalingrad. No, they were smart enough to know this was the German way of saying, we got beat, we're screwed, and understood that this moment in the history of the war was the turning point. And to understand that meant you had a great deal of courage. It gave people courage. They could continue some more with what they were doing. They listened to the BBC. They were able to teach each other a little bit of English. The music came along. They would dance. They would make the best of what they could. My mother was a seamstress. She taught Cora how to sew. This helped because, let's say September, your kids go to school, you want some new clothing for them. There was nothing. You couldn't buy a bolt of cloth. There was no new clothing. People repaired all their clothing. And clothing was exchanged for food. Now, Jan van Dumberg had bell-bottom pants. He would tie bags around his legs, bike to the countryside, exchange repaired clothing for food. So throughout the war years, my parents and Cora and Jan always had plenty of food. This is important because after the war, when I was reunited, I was a poster boy for starvation. And my mother felt very guilty for her whole life. She felt guilty because I was skinny and she was not. And my parents had enough food throughout the war years. Jan also raised rabbits, so they had that. And they're living their life there. I'm living my life here. In 1944, the southern part of Holland is liberated. My parents are liberated. What to do? They have no idea anymore whether I'm alive. They know their parents were murdered. They know more than half of their siblings were murdered. And there they are. My father gets it in his head. He's going to get himself a handgun, go to Germany, and wreak revenge. Lucky my mother was smarter than he was. She said, no, don't do that stupid thing. He gets a job with the British Army as a cook, works as a cook. The war is over. May 5th, the war is over. Hallelujah. The Dutch people are rejoicing. It's wonderful. For those Jewish survivors, it's a very different moment. You confront your loss. You confront extraordinary alienation. You don't know where you are. You know, and you're in mourning, you know you've lost so much. My father decides he's going to find out who's still alive. Holland is a small country. If you had your car going at 65 kilometers an hour and you started at the German border and go directly west, you'd be the English Channel within an hour and a half. It's really a small country. My father decides he's going to go up and down Holland on foot, finding out who's alive. He goes to commandant's office, to priests, pastors. He goes to the central station because in the central station, the Red Cross would post lists of people who were survivors of the camps. And every day, and not only in Holland, throughout liberated Europe, people would go to the train station, look for their family member names, and more often than not, of course, they didn't find their family members. So you see a tragedy in the making every day in the train station. He finally gets to the town that's near where I was, knocks on the door of the city hall, says, listen, are there any stories of Jewish children being in hiding in the neighborhood? They say, yes, over there's a farm, and there were some Jewish kids in hiding. He gets to the farm, at the end of the day, bangs on the door, hello, my neighbors, I'm looking for, and they say, yeah, go in the barn, stay there tonight, in the morning come in the house. Morning comes, he comes in the house, he sees me for the first time after 3.5 months. He told me he recognized me. I take his word for it. I sit on his lap and I start to talk in my little Dutch and I say, pijn in mijn buik, pijn in mijn buik, pain in my stomach, I'm hungry. He hears buik, he thinks I'm saying book, book. I want a book to read. I don't want to eat anything, I want to read a book. We are speaking two different languages. I don't know who this guy is. He's nice to me, touches me sweetly, speaks to me sweetly. He's smart enough to know he cannot take me right then to take me back to Tilburg. He leaves them, leaves me, goes to Tilburg, tells my mother, I found the princeling, life is good, hooray, hooray. A week or so later, they come back to Heino to take me. But of course, the De Groot family don't want to give me up. Why should they? And who are these two strangers, these vibrating strangers who say they're the kids' parents? It took a while for my parents to convince the family, the relatives of the Duchot family, to give me back. I was lucky. I was a lucky child survivor. My people, my parents, were not broken people. They were happy to be alive, and they had me back. And I had cousins whose parents survived concentration camps, and those cousins would have been better off with their foster families. And I know to say this to some people sounds like a heresy, but back then, imagine, there you are, a family, you're a survivor, who knows how you survived, there are the children, there's no body of concern. When I mean body, institution, there are no social workers, there are no experts to talk about how do you solve this problem. It's never happened before. People, again, had to dance as fast as they could. They did the best they could. The government went to the resistance groups and said, this is a situation, what do we do? The resistance groups, of course, were invested, give the children back. Sometimes it was not the right answer. I was lucky. I was with my parents who were happy to have me and did the work that was necessary to bond with me. They stayed in touch with the Duchot family, but at some point the Duchot family wanted me to be baptized. Now we know Jews are not big on baptism. They wanted me to be baptized because they thought that if the Shoah should happen again, at least I would be safe. We all know what happened to the Jews who converted, who were baptized. My parents took this as the opportunity to cut relations with them, and it's too bad because it would have been important for me and them to stay in touch with the Duchot family, but I understand my parents wanted to have me all to themselves, to bond with me and build a life with me, and we did that. And I heard nothing more from the Duchot family. So we're living in Amsterdam. Right after the war, my aunt Roos from America comes to Europe to see what she could do. She tells my father, "Kom naar Amerika, we'll open up a restaurant for you. It'll be wonderful." Okay, say my parents. So from 1945 to 1949, they work, they make the money, and we come to America with my brother / cousin Andy, and my aunt and uncle, and their daughters Sylvia and Janneke. And I remember being on the SS New Amsterdam, and we discovered these 3 incredible new things, and I hope I'm pronouncing them right. One is swimming pool, the other is library, and elevator. And Andy and I would press the button, run downstairs, press it again, and really became the pain in the ass kids on the boat. We had a great time. We come to Hoboken, New Jersey, which was the port city of the Holland America line. And there's my aunt, my Tante Rose. She calls me over, "Jackie, go to that man over there and say blah, blah, blah." I didn't know from English. I go there, I say blah, 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 and the police officer welcomes me to America. We moved to Far Rockaway, where a few months we're sleeping in an attic on cots, and then we get our own apartments and live in Far Rockaway. And we had relatives here who were helpful, but did not want to hear a thing about it. Their advice was, it was a terrible nightmare, work hard, everything will be okay. And that was the message, explicit and implicit. And my parents, like most of us, said, okay. So my father did not end up in the Golden Restaurant. He worked in the garment district. My mother worked in the garment district. And we moved to a project called Beach Haven, which was a Trump family project. We lived there until it came time for my brother and I to have our own place. We turned 21 and we had our own place. And my mother was very upset because the European tradition is the boys and the girls would stay home till they got married. We wanted our own place. And my mother said, "Oh, it's because of the girls, isn't it?" We said, "No, Ma, no." She was right. And my brother and I have an apartment in Brooklyn Heights, but on the weekend we come home because my mother still made better cheeseburgers than we did. And we were the kind of survivor family that after the dinner would always talk about what happened, because Andy and I had questions, because much earlier on, when we were about 9 or 10 years old, my parents sit us down and say, Andy, Jackie, guess what? You're not brothers, you're cousins. Andy, your mother Marie was Jackie, your father's sister. So we learn all of this, Andy and I remember that night going to bed and weeping and crying, and my heart was hurting, thinking, oh, poor Andy, lost his mommy and daddy. It took me about 5.5 decades to understand I was crying for myself. I even feel the lump now. And as a child survivor and a survivor, this trauma takes an incredibly long time to confront and deal with it. And I was lucky because in 1990, there were 5 women survivors who were also hidden children who organized a conference in New York City for this community. They expected about 300 people. 1,600 people showed up. And we have been meeting since then. Before the Trump-coronavirus, we would meet once a month, and then we did the Zoom, and we meet every Sunday morning, except today, and we talk about what it's like being elderberries. When we were younger, we would talk about our stories and share them and help each other out. And now we talk about what it's like to be these elderly people who remember things we'd like to forget, who can't forget things, all the memory issues. But it's very important because we are cousins, we are family, and there are some of you here today. I started speaking some years ago at Northeastern, and somebody asked me why I speak, and the answer is that I think the story of the Holocaust is so absolutely horrible. Horrible. It says something horrible about a European civilization. It says something horrible about human beings, and then there are the exceptions. And I feel that when I'm one of the younger survivors, when I am gone, the story will then be told by scholars, and there will be no more survivors. And the yearning to turn this into a sweeter, more bearable story will become the norm. And this is why I speak. And I am here because there were people who were upstanders, who were not afraid, who did the right thing. Thank you.
We will now be singing Ado Shem Malach, Psalm 93, melody by Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, which is the first interlude in your program.
I
Good afternoon. In addition to all of the dignitaries and civic leaders who have previously been acknowledged, I want to welcome Boston City Councilor Erin Murphy. I'm grateful for us to be back at Faneuil Hall after 4 years. This gathering is an important part of a history of Holocaust memory that has bound the Jewish community with the city of Boston's civic and faith leaders. The New England Holocaust Memorial, right next to Faneuil Hall, was the vision of local survivor Stephen Ross, its founder, who worked with then Mayor Flynn to place the memorial in a prominent site adjacent to the Freedom Trail and where the mayor would see it from his office window. This decision was intended to convey to the people of our city and to those who visit that the work of remembering the atrocities of the Holocaust is not just the work of the Jewish community, but the work of all of us. Mayor Menino picked up the mantle of stewardship, working tirelessly to raise funds to build and dedicate the memorial. Mayor Walsh stood here with the Jewish community in times of crisis, including when the memorial was vandalized and rededicated in 2017. Mayor Janey joined us in 2021 to inaugurate the memorial's new virtual experience for enhancing visitor engagement with memory and learning. And in the very first weeks of her tenure, Mayor Michelle Wu joined us at the New England Holocaust Memorial on a very, very cold winter night to shine a light on anti-Semitism. Mayor Wu has been a great friend and partner to the Jewish community since her early days on the Boston City Council. As we see a sharp uptick in hateful rhetoric and anti-Semitic incidents, both locally and across the country, she is a staunch ally. I am honored to welcome Mayor Wu to this Yom HaShoah as she continues the long-standing relationship of the Mayor of Boston as a steward of this sacred space and the continued memory and lessons of the Holocaust for the people of Boston. Mayor Wu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship over many years. And thank you to all who have come together today in order for Boston to mark in this very solemn and sacred space in our city the importance of remembering. I'm grateful to the Jewish Community Relations Council and the entire Greater Boston Jewish community for ensuring that we continue to have this day of reflection and remembrance in the very seat of our American democracy here in Faneuil Hall. Nearly 80 years ago this month, US troops, when they liberated the Buchenwald and Hanover-Alem concentration camps in Germany, saw what defied description. In letters home to loved ones, they wrote about bursting into tears upon entering the camps, of there being no adjectives capable to capture the scope and brutality of what they saw. And while painful, it is also essential that we recognize that in some cases, soldiers mistreated the very prisoners they were supposed to protect. But many more did not. And it's important in reflecting on the horrors of the Holocaust that we reflect on the whole truth, on every aspect of every story, that we see the full humanity of those denied that humanity and the full depth of suffering inflicted on Jewish communities across Europe. Empathy is an act of courage and resistance. It is not only the greatest way to honor the millions of people who lost their lives and those who survived, but also the greatest tool we have to this day in pushing back against violence, oppression, and erasure all around the world. So I want to say thank you to Jack for your work in building that empathy by continuing to share your story with the world and with those of us here today. Thank you for ensuring that we feel a deep connection to the sense of how many hands got involved for a beautiful baby boy to be a blessing here with us today, of how many hearts showed with the deepest faith and the deepest belief and our shared connection and finding our humanity in each other that made it possible. You are a blessing for all of us, and we're so grateful that you continue to share your story. And to the community organizations, members of our diplomatic corps, my colleagues in city government and at every level, and residents who are here today, thank you again for joining us and remembering what we fought to end and reaffirming our collective commitment to continue fighting each day to prevent it from ever happening again and to stand up as upstanders in the world that we live in today. That is the mission of events like this one and spaces like this one. It's why local survivors, as you heard, created Boston's Holocaust Memorial as a reminder of the capacity that we have to do enormous harm or enormous good, and to encourage us to choose to do good, to honor our responsibility to stand up for and look out for and care for one another and for future generations. Here in Boston, we are feeling that legacy very much so this weekend and headed into Marathon Monday. We know that our city's strength and beauty is rooted in the diversity of our people and our collective shared commitment that our city must be a city for everyone. There is no hate strong enough to uproot us, and our collective commitment and love will ensure that we carry this very important legacy forward. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, I'm Josie Kamens.
And I'm Ellie Furtick. We are both students and a senior elective on the Holocaust at Gann Academy. This year, we have been specifically learning about one of the deadliest death camps, Treblinka, and its commandant, Franz Stangl. We will tell you more about Treblinka, Stangl, and about our class in a moment. In so many ways, the two quotes on the screen embody what we have learned in our class this year. They're also the two lead quotes of Gita Sarani's book, Into That Darkness, the culmination of almost 80 hours of interviews she did with Franz Stangl.
Franz Stangl was born in Austria in 1908. He was an ordinary man with no tendencies to hatred or violence. He even spoke of hating uniforms before joining the Austrian Federal Police in 1930. When the Nazis took over in Austria in 1938, they also took over the Austrian police. Stangl was now working for the Nazis. His first major assignment would come in 1940.
In 1940, Stangl was assigned to Hartheim Castle near Linz, Austria. Hartheim was one of the 6 killing centers in Greater Germany for people with intellectual and physical disabilities. Stangl was in charge of security for Hartheim. He expressed horror at the murders going on all around him. 60,000 in each of the 6 killing centers. But not only did he stay, he accepted the next assignment given to him.
In April 1942, SS General Adilo Globachnik ordered Stangl to eastern Poland to oversee the construction and the running of a new camp called Sobibor. Though Stangl said he knew nothing of the purpose of the camp upon his arrival, within weeks he and another fellow T4 worker discovered a building that looked almost identical to the gas chambers at Hartheim. In the 3 months, Stangl was commandant or commander at Sobibor. Nearly 90,000 Jews were murdered. He was then transferred to Treblinka.
At Treblinka, Stangl oversaw the deadliest of all Nazi killing centers, second only to Auschwitz. Jews from ghettos all over Europe, but primarily nearby major cities like Warsaw and Bialystok, would be herded onto cattle cars and taken to Treblinka. Within 2 hours of their arrival, 99% of those who survived the train journey were dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. In his 11 months of overseeing Treblinka, nearly 900,000 Jews were murdered. After the war, Stangl was captured by the Americans and imprisoned. After 2 years, Stangl escaped. He eventually landed in Brazil, where he lived until 1967, when he was arrested and taken to Germany for trial.
Stangl was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison in Germany. Awaiting appeal, Stangl was approached by Austrian journalist Guido Sereni, who asked him if he would be willing to sit for an interview. Stangl agreed and for 2 hours spouted lines about hurting no one and just following orders. After those 2 hours, Sereni told Stangl that she'd been to dozens of trials of Nazi war criminals and was uninterested in hearing the same mindless and useless disavowals of responsibility. If you have nothing else to add, I'll go home and write a short story about our interview. But if you want to dig deeper, if you want to tell me your life story, I will stay and listen.
Stangl left for lunch and then returned. "I've thought about what you said," he told me at once, his voice slightly unsteady. "I hadn't understood before. I hadn't understood what you wanted. I think I understand now. I want to do it. I want to try to do it." There were tears in his eyes before we began to speak of his childhood. "I thought you just wanted, an interview," he said, emphasizing that loaded term. I had some English cigarettes and he took one. He was, as I soon saw, a chain smoker. "My childhood," he began, shaking his head several times. "I'll tell you."
What resulted was 80 hours of interviews with Stangl. Sereni also went to interview every person Stangl mentioned that she could find. They included Stangl's wife, other guards, and Jews who survived Treblinka and Sobibor. Those interviews became one of the most important books exploring the Holocaust and the problem of evil, Into That Darkness.
We have spent our year studying the story of Franz Stangl, the horrors of Treblinka, and have tried to make sense of how something as senseless as the Holocaust could have happened. Our big project of the year has been helping to produce a play based off Sereni's book called In Quest of Conscience. It is a 4-person, 1-act show that delves deeply into Stangl-Sereni interviews. We have served as dramaturgs, teaching the actors about Franz Stangl and the history of Treblinka, and as public historians, constructing an exhibit on Stangl and Treblinka for the theater lobby.
The show will be coming this coming Thursday night, April 20th at 7 p.m. at Gann Academy. You are all invited and encouraged to attend. There are flyers here with information on how to get tickets. Tickets are free, and we hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Arbeiter. 17 years ago, my father, Izzy Arbeiter, who worked tirelessly to educate young people about the Holocaust and the consequences of bigotry, created the Israel Arbeiter Holocaust Essay Contest. Students from all over Greater Boston submit entries for a chance at a trip to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. They grapple with the complexity of this painful history, their role in carrying forward the legacy of the survivors, and standing up to hatred in all of its forms. We have 6 incredible student winners this year. Their essays touch on personal experiences of intolerance and reflections of the world today. Their smart and insightful essays give us hope for the future and that stories like my father's will not be forgotten. I know he would be heartened to see them all here today. In first place, for the high school division, Jasper Fernandez, Stoughton High School. In second place, Yasmin Brita, Methuen High School. In third place, Jeremy Sorkin, Marblehead High School, who was not able to join us today. In first place for the middle school division, Kiara McGinnis, Hingham Middle School. In second place, Ephraim Banks, Maimonides School in Brookline. In third place, Brianna Weiss, Hingham Middle School. Congratulations to our winners.
Congratulations again. I hope you all leave here this afternoon inspired and confident that there are many of us standing together to denounce those who would try to divide us in this moment, and that the next generation is listening and learning from the survivors and their descendants. And now you must answer this question for yourselves. How will you meet this moment? When you hear hateful language and see acts of bigotry, will you speak up? Let us all commit to doing so. Let us honor our survivors and the 6 million by standing up. We close today with two prayers, El Malach Rachamim and the Mourner's Kaddish. Afterwards, I will ask that you all wait for the people on the dais to exit first, followed by our Holocaust survivors. You will then be dismissed by row. Please join us immediately after at the New England Holocaust Memorial for remarks by President and CEO of the Combined Jewish Philanthropies, Rabbi Mark Baker, and a moment of silence. Our new team of memorial docents will also be available to provide tours and answer questions. And again, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today.
Towards the back of your booklets, the text is there if you'd like to follow. Please rise if you are able. Keeping faith is very hard. I, as a child of survivors, am racked with doubt much of the day, but I return to a place deep in my heart. And this prayer, if you will, El Malach Rachamim, talks about the fact that there's still room for compassion. Compassion is a very important word. We start with compassion for ourselves, and then compassion for those we love, and then compassion for all those who suffer in these very trying times throughout the world.
המצא מנוחו נכונו, מנוחו נכונו, תחת כנפי השכינו, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע המסתירים, את נשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנהרגו ושנטבחו ושנשרפו ושנחנקו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנו בעל הרחמים הסתירם בסתר כנופך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם ונאמר Amen. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life, and may they rest in peace, and we say Amen. The Mourner's Kaddish is found again, I think, a page or two from the end of your book. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah בעלמא דברה חירותי, ויבליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל,
בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ויאמרו אמן.
ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון יקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה, הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון